welcome to SundaySchoolReview.com, where we go over and review the Sunday school lesson so you will be well prepared and informed when you go to Sunday school on Sunday morning at your local church. We're going to study the lesson for February the 11th, 2018. We're in a section that's dealing with faith, a disciplined faith, or faith in action. The unit that we're in is dealing with self-control, upright, godly faith, and godly living. The printed text can be found in the book of James, chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. And I'm reading in the New King James Version, a little bit easier to understand. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in the horse's mouth that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder whenever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a force a little fire kindles? And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. Verse 8, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessings and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not be so. Does a spring set forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt, water, and fresh. Let me just read for you once again. The golden text is verse 8. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Let's look at the lesson outline. Let's look at the background first. We find in this lesson James, the half-brother of Jesus Christ, and a leader in the church of Jerusalem, is speaking. Who is he talking to? He's talking to the first century Jewish Christian residents in the Gentile communities outside of Palestine, scattered throughout Rome, and he's also talking to all Christians of all ages and all times. So that includes you, and that includes me. The time of the lesson, we believe, was AD 49. The place of the lesson was Jerusalem. What are some of the issues that are being discussed in this lesson that applies to back then in AD 49 as well as applies to BC 2018, our time now? Let's look at issues. The book of James was written to expose hypocritical practices and to teach right Christian behavior. The Jewish Christians were troubled by trials and testings as well as by big problems in their assemblies. This letter expresses James' concern for persecuted Christians who were once part of the Jewish church. James wrote this epistle to help them mature in their faith. James wrote this epistle to help them mature in their faith. I repeated that on purpose. This letter could be a how-to book on Christian living. Confrontation, challenges, and a call to commitment are within this epistle. Emphasis is placed on becoming a doer of the word. James chapter 1 verses 22 to 25. Finally, James states that faith without works is dead. James chapter 2 verse 20. While Paul stated that we are saved by grace through faith. Ephesians chapter 2 verses 8 through 9. These two beliefs can be reconciled by remembering that Paul's emphasis was on becoming a Christian, while James' emphasis was on demonstrating a faith after we have become saved. We find in James chapter 3 verses 1 through 2, the standard is high. Teachers are judged at a higher standard. Verse 1. To whom much is given, much is required. We find that in Luke chapter 12, verses 48. We all make mistakes. Unable to control the whole body. We all make mistakes. We find that in verse 2. So you have the standard, we're at a higher standard. The standard is high. But also the nature of the tongue. The nature of the tongue is discussed in James chapter 3 verses 3 through 6. To control a horse, or the control of a horse. How the bit is put in that mouth to control that big, mighty, strong stallion animal. Is controlled by his tongue with that bit on that tongue. Also is given the example, metaphor of the control of a ship. Got this mighty big huge ship, and that little big ship is controlled by a small rudder that steers that thing. The ship analogy is in verse 4, the horse is in verse 3. The problem with the tongue, verses 5 through 6. The Bible, the word says, is like a fire. So you have the standard is high, the nature of the tongue, and then you have the tongue is uncontrollable. James chapter 3 verses 7 through 8. The taming of beasts and other animals, those have been tamed. The problem with the tongue, it cannot be tamed by man. It's full of deadly poison. You see that in verse 8. Then it moves on to talk about the ungodly use of the tongue. Verses 9 through 12. The blessings of God and cursing of men from the same mouth. You bless God, same mouth, same tongue. You also curse man. Verses 9 through 10. Then we have an example of a fountain. Verse 11. And the example of a fig tree and a fountain in verse 12. The conclusion. The tongue can be extremely harmful. We all know or have experience of dealing with someone who just had a mouth on them, and that mouth could cut you up. That's that tongue. But we also have experience in our life where we had people in our lives that with their mouth, with their speech, they were uplifting, and they helped us, encouraged us, motivated us, inspired us. So the question I have for you is, how are you using your tongue? Are you using it to cut people down? Are you using it to help people out? In the comment section, give me some examples on how your speech can help others. Or maybe somebody that you know that's motivated you. You may want to shout out your pastor, how his speech has helped you. Your Sunday school teacher, how he or she may have helped motivated you with their speech and the word of God that they're preaching and they're sharing towards you. How do you use your tongue? To harm and complain, or to praise and encourage? What's some of the advice that you'll give someone on how to control their tongue? Remember there's an old saying, what's that saying? God gave you 2 ears and one mouth so that you can listen twice as much as you talk. Maybe a way to control that tongue is to do more listening and less talking. Faith in action. Once again, that's the theme of the unit. Faith in action. Self-control, upright and godly faith. All words are important. The second note in the conclusion, all words are important. Only God can control the tongue as we mature in faith. Only God can control the tongue as we mature in faith. Just looking at my notes, how do you use your tongue? Advice on how to control your tongue. You know, especially with our children and that age where they're saying whatever comes to their mind, but being able to control the tongue. How do you correct them? How do you correct yourself? Are you using your words to help and uplift others? The power of the tongue. That has been our Sunday School lesson review. Hopefully that's been helpful for you. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button. Subscribe to our channel. This is the first one. Help support us. Send us your prayers, your well wishes. In conclusion, just want to leave you with Psalms chapter 19, verse 14. And this should be very familiar with many of you. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Thank you for tuning in to SundaySchoolReview.com. We'll see you next week. Remember, enjoy your blessings.